Welcome to the channel, where today we plunge headfirst into one of the most bewildering and captivating mysteries in all of modern numismatics. A story so drenched in intrigue, shadowed history, and unanswered questions that it's going to take every ounce of focus you have to keep up. Because what if a small mistake made it one of the rarest coins ever struck? What if the tiniest imperfection, a sliver of misplaced metal, a faint doubling in the design, a ghostly image not visible to the casual eye, turned an ordinary 2005 Roosevelt dime into an artifact that numismatists whisper about with equal parts awe and disbelief? A coin wrapped in layers of production anomalies, minting errors, and strange inconsistencies that seem to defy everything we know about how coins are supposed to be made. And to understand why this particular dime has such a strange gravitational pull on collectors, you have to step back into the historical and industrial context of the mid-2000s U.S. Mint, when production was running at breakneck speeds to meet public demand. Automated processes were more sophisticated than ever. And yet, somehow, flaws were slipping through, and not just any flaws, but errors so odd and unexplained that even seasoned error coin experts were left scratching their heads, because this wasn't your run-of-the-mill off-center strike or clipped planchet. Oh no, this was a dime that sometimes appeared with bizarrely misaligned dies where the portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt seemed to be tilting just slightly, a subtle but unmistakable shift that gave his profile an almost haunted quality. And in other specimens, collectors have documented doubled features where the lettering in Liberty or the date itself appeared as if it had been struck twice, with the second impression ghosting just enough to send shivers down the spine of anyone studying it under magnification. And then there were the whispers of pieces where the initials JS, standing for John Sinek, the coin's designer, were either missing entirely or so faint they could be mistaken for a trick of the light, leading to wild speculation about whether these were genuine mint oversights, intentional test strikes, or something more clandestine. And to make matters even more perplexing, some examples have surfaced bearing shadow-like impressions of devices that shouldn't be there at all, faint outlines of what appear to be die clashes where elements from the reverse and obverse designs bled into each other in ways that official records insist could not have happened under proper minting conditions, sparking theories of experimental die pairings or even secret production runs that were never meant to see the light of day. And when you add in the occasional reports of planchet flaws, tiny cracks, laminations, or uneven metal flow that distort the details of Roosevelt's face or the torch, olive branch, and oak leaves on the reverse, you start to see why this single mint mark has become a labyrinth of speculation, with some experts proposing that a defective batch of planchets was accidentally used, while others point to the possibility of an internal quality control breakdown at the Philadelphia Mint in 2005. A breakdown that may have allowed multiple varieties of anomalies to slip out in small numbers, feeding the obsession of those lucky enough, or perhaps fated enough, to encounter them in change. And yet the more you dig into the story, the stranger it gets, because the U.S. Mint's official stance is as sterile and straightforward as you'd expect, denying any intentional deviations and offering only generic acknowledgments that errors happen from time to time. But behind the curtain of public statements, there are persistent rumors of internal reports, whispered about by former employees, that detail unexplained die behavior and production halts during that year, with one particularly persistent story involving a set of dies that mysteriously vanished from inventory for several days before reappearing in a condition that suggested they had been used, though no official production records could confirm such a thing. And this fuels the more conspiratorial theories among collectors, who wonder if certain coins were struck as part of private experiments, die trials, or unsanctioned runs by someone with inside access. And while such claims are impossible to verify, they refuse to go away, passed down in coin club meetings, hidden forum threads, and the back pages of obscure numismatic newsletters. And all of this adds up to a numismatic enigma that goes far beyond the simple mechanics of coin striking, because at its core, the 2005 P. Roosevelt dime represents the intoxicating possibility that there are still mysteries in our modern coinage waiting to be uncovered, that the rigid systems of modern minting are not as airtight as we imagine, and that somewhere, perhaps in the very next handful of change you receive, there could be a piece of metal history carrying within it the fingerprint of a moment that wasn't supposed to happen, a whisper from the hidden machinery of the mint, a survivor of conditions and circumstances no one can fully explain. And as you follow the trail deeper, you realize that for every documented anomaly, every doubled die, missing initial, misaligned strike, there are likely more out there unrecognized, sitting quietly in drawers, jars, and pockets, waiting for the one person curious enough to look closely. And this is what keeps the hunt alive, because it's not just about finding a rare coin, it's about connecting to the story it tells, about holding in your hand a physical remnant of a mystery that links you to the hidden history of the mint, to the anonymous workers and unrecorded moments that shaped it. And the more you think about it, the more you can't help but wonder what else is out there, what other anomalies are hiding in plain sight, and whether the 2005 P. Roosevelt dime is merely the tip of an iceberg we've barely begun to explore. Because in the world of numismatics, sometimes the smallest pieces carry the biggest secrets. And this particular dime has secrets so deep, so tangled, and so alluring that even after years of study, speculation, and passionate debate, it refuses to yield all its truths, beckoning us to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep our eyes open for the next strange, inexplicable piece of history that might just pass through our hands, without warning, daring us to recognize it for what it is before it vanishes again into the endless churn of coins in circulation, taking its mysteries with it forever. Next, we dive straight into one of the most confounding, goosebump-inducing mysteries in the modern history of American coinage, the kind of story that grips you from the first whisper of its existence and refuses to let go. Because what if a small mistake, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, made the 2013 D. Roosevelt dime one of the rarest coins ever struck? Not just a fluke of the minting process, but a coin wrapped in layers of anomalies so strange, so contradictory, that each discovery only deepens the fog surrounding it. And as we peel back these layers, we're not just looking at a coin, we're looking at an industrial enigma, an accidental, or maybe intentional, act of defiance against the perfection of modern minting, born in an era when the U.S. mint's processes were supposedly flawless, with laser-guided precision, sophisticated die maintenance, and computerized quality control that should have eliminated every possibility of error. Yet in Denver, in that fateful year, something happened, something that let slip into the wild a batch of dimes so unusual that their very existence mocks the idea of a perfect mint. And the first hints came from eagle-eyed collectors who began noticing subtle but undeniable inconsistencies. Roosevelt's profile appearing ever so slightly skewed, as if the obverse die had been seated just a hair off its correct position, giving the president's image a tense, leaning forward stance that looked intentional but couldn't possibly have been authorized, while others reported doubled letters in the word liberty or the date itself, faint but visible under magnification, like an echo of the original strike whispering from beneath the surface. And more curious still were the pieces where John Sinek's initials, JS, seemed to have faded into nothingness, a feature so inconsistent and baffling that it set off a wave of speculation. Were these from worn dies left in production too long? Or was there something more clandestine? An unrecorded die trial, perhaps, or an experimental finish that was never meant for circulation, happening behind closed doors. And just when experts thought they'd seen the full range of oddities, reports began emerging of coins with ghost-like impressions, strange shadow devices on the reverse that appeared to be the faint outlines of die clashes, where the obverse and reverse designs had met without a planchet between them, imprinting each other in ways so subtle they could almost be missed. Yet once seen, they could not be unseen, and those faint impressions brought with them a new layer of mystery because according to official production data, the die pairs used in Denver that year should have been perfectly aligned and inspected to prevent such incidents, leading some to theorize that a rogue die pair had been pressed into service without proper documentation, maybe even for testing, and somehow escaped destruction, which would explain not just the die clash marks, but also the occasional off-center strikes and planchet flaws. Coins with tiny cracks, ragged edges, or irregular metal flow that distorted the details of Roosevelt's face or the torch, olive branch, and oak leaves on the reverse. And if you think these were just isolated defects, think again, because across the country, from change jars in small-town kitchens to the coin rolls in bank vaults, these strange 2013 D-dimes kept surfacing sporadically, never in great numbers, always in just enough quantity to keep the legend alive, and as collectors scrambled to find more, the theories multiplied. Maybe a shipment of defective planchets had been delivered from a supplier and used without anyone noticing. Maybe there had been a covert attempt to produce a special strike that got mixed into regular circulation. Maybe a set of dies had been tampered with by someone inside the mint, either as a prank or as a calculated act meant to leave behind a numismatic breadcrumb trail. And in every corner of the hobby, whispers spread about confidential mint memos and unexplained production halts during that year, with one particularly persistent story claiming that for nearly a week, a specific press line at the Denver Mint was taken offline under circumstances that were never explained to the rank-and-file workers. And when it came back online, coins began emerging that matched the error characteristics we see in these anomalies today. And yet no official acknowledgement ever came. No explanation was offered, just a steady flow of denials and boilerplate responses about how errors are a natural part of coin production. But in the quiet back rooms of coin shows and in the locked drawers of serious collectors, the 2013 D Roosevelt dime was being treated like an unsolved riddle. Each specimen scrutinized under microscopes, compared, catalogued, and debated, with some showing subtle die deterioration lines radiating from Roosevelt's jaw, others bearing tiny raised lumps of metal known as die chips near the mint mark or the torch, each new find adding fuel to the fire of speculation. And as the years passed without a definitive answer, the dime's mystique only grew, transforming it from an obscure curiosity into a full-blown numismatic obsession. Because at its heart, this isn't just about a coin. It's about the possibility that the mint, despite its rigorous controls, can still produce artifacts that escape its own understanding. Physical pieces of history that contain within them the fingerprints of unrecorded events, the silent testimony of moments when the system faltered or someone deliberately pushed its boundaries. And the more you study the 2013 D Roosevelt dime, the more you realize that we may never know the whole story. Because the Mint's archives aren't open to the public, the supposed internal reports remain locked away, and the employees who might have been there that year either aren't talking or have long since moved on, leaving behind only the coins, themselves as evidence, silent, unyielding, but undeniably real, and somewhere out there, maybe in a pocket, maybe in a coin jar under someone's bed, there are more of them, pieces waiting to be recognized for what they are, waiting for the right pair of eyes to catch the doubling on the date, the faint clash marks, the missing initials, the skewed profile, and when that happens, the story will deepen again, because each new find doesn't solve the mystery, it multiplies it, reminding us that in the world of coins, perfection is a myth, and every anomaly is an invitation to dig deeper, to question harder, to search longer. Because you never know when the most extraordinary piece of history will be hiding in plain sight, riding unnoticed in the change from a morning coffee, or sitting for years in the bottom of a desk drawer, waiting for the moment it changes the way we see not just the coin itself, but the hidden, unpredictable heart of the mint that made it. Next, we plunge into the shadowy, spine-tingling mystery of the 2016 P. Roosevelt dime, a coin that on the surface should be just another tiny piece of pocket change, unremarkable and destined to slip unnoticed through the hands of millions. But beneath its modest facade lies a labyrinth of unanswered questions, minting anomalies, and strange inconsistencies so complex that even seasoned experts have found themselves pacing their studies late at night, replaying every known fact in their minds. Because what if a small mistake, a momentary lapse in precision, a fleeting miscalibration in the press, or even a deliberate act hidden in plain sight, made this coin one of the rarest ever struck, a piece so steeped in hidden details and unusual traits that each new discovery only deepens the sense that we are dealing with something far beyond an ordinary mint error, something that feels almost like a deliberate message from the heart of the U.S. Mint's most closely guarded operations. And to understand why this coin has gripped the imaginations of collectors across the globe, we have to rewind to the historical backdrop of 2016, when the Philadelphia Mint was in full throttle, its presses hammering out tens of millions of dimes with blistering speed and computer-monitored precision, every die alignment, every metal blank, every strike recorded and analyzed to ensure flawless quality. Or so the official story goes, because somewhere in the flow of that year's production, flaws began to appear, and not just ordinary nicks or scratches from circulation, but anomalies so bizarre they seem to mock the very systems designed to prevent them. Starting with subtle yet undeniable misalignments in Roosevelt's profile, where his face appeared fractionally tilted or shifted in a way that gave the portrait an odd, almost uncanny presence, and in some specimens the word Liberty and the date displayed faint doubling, a ghostly second image offset, just enough to be visible to the trained eye, as if the coin had been struck twice in perfect synchronization, yet slightly out of register, while others bore an even more tantalizing detail: the complete or partial absence of John Sinek's initials, JS, beneath Roosevelt's neck, initials that are an immovable fixture of the design, and whose absence is so rare it sends shockwaves through the numismatic community whenever a credible example surfaces, prompting fierce debates over whether these were caused by over-polished dies filled, die errors, or intentional removal during some unrecorded mint process. And then there are the reports of faint, almost ethereal impressions of devices that shouldn't be there at all, shapes and outlines bleeding into the coin's fields that match elements from the opposite side. Clear signs of die clashes that official production data insists should be impossible under modern safeguards. Yet here they are, staring back at us from the coin's surface like a fingerprint at a crime scene. And as if that weren't enough, several documented examples show evidence of planchet flaws: microscopic fissures, irregular rim shapes, incomplete metal flow that distort the sharpness of the design, flaws that suggest either defective planchets slipped through inspection or a production issue caused them to deform during striking, raising the unsettling possibility that an entire unnoticed batch of flawed blanks made its way into the presses that year. And while the Mint offers no acknowledgement beyond the usual boilerplate that errors occur naturally in the manufacturing process, whispers among former employees and seasoned collectors tell a different story: of unexplained production halts in certain press lines, of dies removed from inventory and then reappearing with unusual wear patterns, of confidential internal memos detailing anomalous strike characteristics that were never intended for public release. And this is where the theories begin to spiral, because in the absence of official answers, the community has filled the void with speculation ranging from the plausible, such as accidental use of experimental dies or test strikes that slipped into circulation, to the sensational, with some claiming these coins were deliberately created by someone with inside access as a kind of calling card to future collectors. And the deeper you go, the stranger it gets, with isolated reports of pieces that appear to blend features from multiple design stages, as if transitional elements were struck onto a standard 2016 P planchet, a phenomenon that should be impossible given the tight controls on die usage. Yet here are coins that seem to defy those rules, And with each new specimen that emerges, the obsession only grows, because if one coin escaped, then there might be others still hiding in plain sight, rattling around in change jars, resting in bank rolls, passed over by those who never thought to look closely. And this is what makes the hunt so intoxicating. The idea that at any moment you could stumble upon a piece of history that was never meant to exist, a tangible artifact of an unrecorded event inside one of the most secure manufacturing facilities in the world. And what's perhaps most fascinating is that every new find doesn't solve the mystery, but instead multiplies it, raising fresh questions about how such anomalies could survive multiple layers of quality control, what they reveal about the vulnerabilities in modern minting systems, and whether the mint itself truly understands, or is willing to admit, how they came to be. And so the story of the 2016 Roosevelt dime continues to unfold like a numismatic thriller with no final chapter, each twist pulling us deeper into a world where history, technology, human error, and maybe even a dash of mischief converge to produce a coin that challenges everything we think we know about the minting process. A coin that keeps collectors awake at night with visions of shadow devices, ghostly impressions, vanishing initials, and the haunting question that will not die. How many more of these are out there, waiting to be found before they disappear forever back into the endless churn of American currency, taking their secrets with them into oblivion? Next, we step into the shadows of one of the most perplexing and intoxicating mysteries in the realm of modern American coinage. A mystery that has baffled veteran numismatists, fueled countless late-night debates, and sent collectors scrambling to peer more closely at the coins in their pockets. Because what if a small mistake, something so subtle it could easily slip past an untrained glance, made the 2018 Roosevelt dime one of the rarest coins ever struck? Not just an everyday piece of currency, but a tangible relic of a chain of improbable events. A coin wrapped in layers of minting anomalies, unexplained production choices, and a cloud of unanswered questions that make it more a cryptic artifact than a standard issue. And to understand how this happened, we have to rewind to 2018, a year when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at peak efficiency, striking billions of coins with advanced high-speed presses, automated inspection systems, and rigorous quality control that was supposed to make the very idea of significant errors nearly impossible. Yet despite this fortress of precision, something slipped through, and not just one thing, but a cascade of strange occurrences that somehow converged on the Roosevelt dime. Starting with misaligned strikes, so precise in their imperfection that they altered Roosevelt's profile ever so slightly, giving the portrait a subtle but undeniable lean that looked intentional, yet defied official design standards, followed by doubling. In key areas like the date and the word liberty, faint shadows of a second strike offset just enough to catch the eye under magnification. Each one a fingerprint of a mechanical misstep that shouldn't have been possible under modern calibration. And then came the truly chilling reports. Coins where John Sinek's initials, JS, were either missing entirely or so faint they seemed like a phantom signature, raising theories of overpolished dies, filled die errors, or even unauthorized die modifications that no production record could confirm. And just when experts thought they had mapped the extent of the anomaly, more strange features surfaced. Ghost-like impressions on the reverse where elements from the obverse seemed to bleed through, faint and spectral, clear signs of die clashes that should have been detected and corrected immediately, yet here they were in circulation, as if the coins themselves were quietly telling the story of a moment when the machinery faltered, or was pushed beyond its limits. And alongside these were examples with planchet flaws, tiny fissures, ragged rims, or irregular metal flow patterns that subtly warped the fine details of both obverse and reverse, signs that defective blanks may have been fed into the presses unchecked, or that something in the striking process distorted the metal in ways that normal operation could not explain. And with every new specimen discovered, the questions only multiplied, because the mint's official position remained the same: boilerplate acknowledgments that errors happen from time to time. Yet whispers among former employees and sharp-eyed insiders painted a more unsettling picture, one of unexplained production stoppages, dies disappearing from active use without proper documentation, and internal memos referencing unusual strike characteristics that were never shared with the public. And this has given rise to some of the most captivating theories in modern coin collecting, from the plausible, like accidental use of prototype dies or experimental die finishes that were never meant for release, to the more speculative, with some suggesting that these anomalies were deliberately introduced by someone inside the mint, perhaps as a calling card to future collectors, or as a way to test the limits of the quality control systems without drawing official attention. And as this web of possibilities spreads, the obsession among collectors deepens, because if one of these dimes slipped into circulation, there could be dozens or even hundreds more hiding in plain sight, mingled with ordinary change in bank rolls, coin jars, and cash registers across the country, each one waiting for the right pair of eyes to notice the doubling on the lettering, the absence of initials, the faint clash marks, the subtle tilt in the portrait. And the hunt for these coins has taken on the intensity of a treasure quest, with every twist in the story pulling the community deeper into a game of detection and speculation, where each new find doesn't close the case but blows it wide open again, raising fresh questions about how such a coin could survive the layers of inspection meant to weed out every defect, what it reveals about the vulnerabilities in the most technologically advanced minting system in the world, and whether the anomalies we've seen are just the tip of an iceberg of undiscovered errors still circulating undetected. And so the 2018 Roosevelt dime remains not just a collectible curiosity but a numismatic enigma, a perfect storm of history, machinery, and human oversight, or perhaps human intent, that continues to haunt the imagination of those who encounter it, a coin that stands as a silent, unyielding witness to a moment in time the mint has never fully explained, and maybe never will, daring us to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep believing that somewhere out there, hidden in the ordinary flow of everyday commerce, lies the next piece of this puzzle, ready to deepen the mystery all over again. Next, what if a small mistake made it one of the rarest coins ever struck? Not because of its precious metal content, not because it was set aside for a dignitary, but because the stars aligned in the most bizarre, improbable, and downright unexplainable way in the controlled chaos of the U.S. Mint in 2001. Deep in the Denver facility where machines thundered, dies slammed, and billions of coins were born, yet somewhere in that industrial ballet, the 2001 Roosevelt dime slipped through, carrying within it a story that has since evolved into one of the strangest mysteries in American numismatics. A coin that should be as ordinary as the change in your pocket, yet has been whispered about in hushed tones at coin shows, dissected endlessly in forums, and quietly hunted by collectors who believe that in its surface lies proof of something far more extraordinary than a mere production fluke. And so we begin this journey by plunging straight into the heart of that year. 2001, a year already weighted with history, a year that in the minting world was supposed to be routine for the humble Roosevelt dime, a design unchanged for decades, a workhorse denomination struck in the billions. But what if I told you that in the controlled environment of that mint, anomalies began creeping in, strange inconsistencies that didn't match the clean, uniform profile expected from modern minting, subtle but undeniable deviations. Mint marks that appeared misplaced or in shapes never officially documented, design elements that seemed doubled as if the die shuddered during striking, ghostly outlines where no devices should exist, and planchet flaws that seem to mimic deliberate patterns rather than random defects, sparking debates that spiraled into theories of experimental dies, secret test runs, and even unofficial strike batches. And as these rumors gained momentum, so too did the obsession of those who encountered one of these dimes in the wild. People who swear that the way the light played across the coin was unlike anything else, that under magnification they saw faint impressions of features long retired from the Roosevelt series, as if the coin was a palimpsest carrying hidden designs from another era, leading to speculation that the dies used may have been repurposed from long-forgotten trials, or perhaps partially overlaid with remnants of abandoned engravings. And here's where the trail grows darker, because in the archives of the mint there are gaps, missing production logs for certain runs in early 2001. And while official statements chalk it up to record-keeping errors, some seasoned insiders have hinted at quiet internal investigations, moments when supervisors whispered in corridors about coins that shouldn't exist, about batches pulled and destroyed, or at least meant to be destroyed, before a few slipped through the cracks, and these cracks, both literal in the coin's surface and metaphorical in the mint's process, have fueled a kind of fever in collectors who scour rolls, bank bags, and estate sales in search of these enigmatic pieces, believing that each one is a fragment of a larger puzzle that, if solved, could rewrite a chapter of minting history. And as we dig deeper into the mechanics of the mint, we have to consider how such anomalies could emerge in an era of laser-engraved dies and strict quality control. Could it be that an experimental hub with altered relief was tested on production lines and accidentally fed into full-scale runs? Or that a batch of planchets intended for foreign contracts, with different metallic compositions or treatments, was mistakenly paired with Roosevelt dime dies, resulting in a visual texture and strike quality unlike any standard issue? And if so, why are there subtle differences even among known anomalous specimens, some showing faint doubling on the date, others exhibiting shadowed mint marks, still others revealing partial clashes where Roosevelt's profile seems to echo faintly in the fields opposite its intended position, as though a ghost image haunts the coin? And then there are the accounts of coins bearing what appear to be missing or incomplete designer initials, as if the JS of John Sinek was swallowed into the metal, leaving only a trace that emerges under angled light, sparking whispers of deliberate removal or dye where inconsistent with the coin's otherwise sharp features. And if you think this is merely coincidence, let me tell you about the handful of coins found with subtle shifts in alignment, where the obverse and reverse don't quite match rotation, as if the die halves were improperly seated, yet not to the dramatic off-center extent that would mark them as obvious errors, but rather a precision of imperfection that makes one wonder whether it was intentional. And if intentional, then for what purpose? And in this shadowy intersection of error, anomaly, and secrecy, the 2001 D. Roosevelt dime becomes more than just a piece of currency. It becomes a message, a relic, a silent witness to an event in the mint that was never meant for public knowledge. And the more one looks, the more one realizes how many threads there are to pull. Stories from retired employees who hint at unexplained equipment swaps, rumors of dies being shipped between mints under unusual circumstances, tales of sudden, unannounced halts to production followed by destruction of partially struck coins. All of which sound like conspiracy until you hold one of these enigmatic dimes in your hand and feel the weight not just of the metal but of the mystery. And this mystery, like any great hunt, has drawn in not just collectors but historians, metallurgists, and even cryptographers who wonder if patterns in the anomalies could form a code, whether intentional or accidental, as if the coin is a cipher forged in the chaos of production. And so the chase continues, with each new discovery deepening the riddle, each photograph and microscopic analysis offering more questions than answers, pulling us further into the labyrinth where history, machinery, and human error intertwine. And perhaps, just perhaps, the final answer is still out there, waiting in the most unlikely of places, hiding in plain sight in a handful of change, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary and the 2001 D. Roosevelt dime keeps its secrets locked in metal. daring us to keep searching, to keep questioning, to never stop turning over each coin in our hand with the hope that the next one might just be the key that unlocks the entire story.